You do? Hey, Corey, are you going to be around here for a minute? I need somebody to take our opening quiz. Yeah, you'll take it? Okay.
Thank you.
I wonder, maybe the thing to do is let Corey sit here in your spot, and then we'll come up? Okay.
So come take my spot for a second.
You may not know who this person is, and that's just fine.
Don't look at that. Don't look at that. Okay.
Not really, but it may be before your time.
Okay. All right.
Your time.
I'm excited.
I got to do the opening quiz.
I hijacked the show.
Yeah.
We're doing Teach Me Pokemon, Michael.
All right. Should we get going? Okay. All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm Michael Osborne. I co-host the podcast Famous and Gravy. The gist of our show is life lessons from dead celebrities. We're looking for ways to make life better, and we want to know what our philosophy is that celebrities, once they die, they have a life story that can teach us something about ourselves. So we really try and turn the lens back on us. A lot of other biography shows are interested in legacy. We're interested in desirability. What are the decisions that we can make in our lives that might point the direction? At the end of our show, we answer two questions. One, would I want that life? And two, what might this person say to St. Peter at the pearly gates if they had an opportunity to make their pitch? We begin every episode with a little quiz. Thank you, Corey, for participating.
Anytime. I'm a little nervous.
All right, so the way this quiz goes is I've got a bunch of clues about today's dead celebrity. All these clues were pulled from their obituary, and we will take, I'll have you take a guess after each clue. The clues are ranked so that by the end, hopefully it's obvious, but these first couple of clues are not helpful.
All right. I'm ready. I'm ready.
So I'll start with this person, and then I'll give you the first clue. This person died 2015, age 76. He taught English at Westminster College in Pennsylvania and at Carleton College in New York. He also taught 1 year of high school.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, it's not helpful.
Yeah, I'm gonna say let's go to the next hint.
Nah, take a wild guess.
take a
Take a wild
stab.
guess. Take a wild
Okay,
guess.
2015.
Yeah,
70 what years old?
76.
70.
And he's a man.
And he's a man.
And he taught.
76.
He taught.
2015. That was what, 9 years ago?
Yeah.
9 years ago.
Yeah.
Taught
Just
English.
a wild stab.
I'm gonna go with an actor. And I just don't know any of these actors' names. Who? Oh no, I don't know if he's dead. Who played Professor Xavier in X-Men? Is he still alive? What's his name?
Sir Patrick Stewart?
Is Sir Patrick Stewart alive? Oh, the first actor that played Gandalf. Or
Ian McKellen?
No, Dumbledore in Harry Potter.
Richard Harris?
Richard Harris?
None of those people.
None of them.
That's
I don't
a
get
fair
any of them.
guess.
Okay,
No,
go to the
there's a
next
kind
one.
of bookish thing to
You're
it. That's
no,
pretty
I'm
good.
not going
All
to
right.
get this. Okay.
This is also not going to be helpful, but you get a little more information.
Okay.
He directed the drama Music of the Heart, based on the true story of a woman who taught violin to underprivileged children in Harlem. Meryl Streep was nominated for an Oscar for her performance.
Oh my word!
He's a director. He's a director.
I feel like just saying like Wilt Chamberlain just to get to the next one.
Not director Wilt Chamberlain.
Not Wilt the
very
still
close.
director. Oh, okay.
All right. This one's a curveball and a little bit awkward, but this is in his obituary. Early in his career, he directed, and if this helps, this is problematic. Early in his career, he directed, wrote, and edited pornographic movies.
Oh well, yeah. Now I got it.
And now you're like,
Wilt Chamberlain. Yeah.
Still
Wilt Chamberlain.
not Wilt Chamberlain.
I'm gonna say. I know because we got to just say a name. Red Auerbach for the Boston Celtics.
Not pornographic director Red Auerbach, but good guess. All right. This one may help. It should help. The last one hopefully will be a giveaway. All right. He directed his first feature film in 1972, The Last House on the Left.
The Last House on the Left?
The Last House on the Left.
Oh, no.
Some of you might
I feel
know
like
this
Lewis
stuff.
in the back might get mad at me. I don't even know if I'm not
You
even
might
playing the
not know
right
the
game
answer.
right now. Like, let alone the ballpark. I'm just trying to think of an actor's name that has passed away that I could say.
You might not know this person. I'll give you the final clue.
Help
You ready?
me.
All
Get
right.
Final clue. Final clue.
Perhaps his most famous creation was the serial killer Freddy Krueger, who, with his razor blade glove, haunted the dreams of high school students in A Nightmare on Elm Street. He also directed Scream.
Oh man, Freddy Krueger himself. No, Mike, help me, Mike.
Somebody's got to know this.
Give me a name.
Today's dead celebrity is Wes Craven.
Oh man,
Well done.
that's good.
Thank you.
I actually know that name. I know that name. I promise. Okay, now I do.
Excellent. So today I'm joined by my sometimes co-host Morgan Honaker. Morgan, thanks for being here.
Of course, of course.
Do check
Thank
1,
you.
2. All right. So the way we do this show is we kind of tell their life story through a series of categories. And again, the whole question is about desirability. Would I want that life? The very first category to kick us off is grading the first line of their obituary. So I'm going to read it, and you and I are going to score it on 1 to 10. Ready to go?
Yep, ready.
Okay. Wes Craven, a master of horror cinema and a proponent of the slasher genre who is best known for creating The Nightmare on Elm Street and Scream franchises, died on Sunday at his home in Los Angeles. He was 76. Initial reactions?
I think it's very informative. It doesn't have a lot of color to
Yeah.
it when we think about like making us think about the personality of someone.
Yeah.
But film directors don't tend to display as much personality unless you're Quentin Tarantino.
It's slasher genre gets
yeah.
at, like, there's some, I don't
Yeah.
know.
My biggest issue with it is the word proponent because I
Yes.
Yes. Okay,
That
so
was
what do
exactly
you-
what, like,
do you
proponent?
think
That
about
makes
that?
it sound
Yeah.
like political, like you're for horror movies or against
Yeah,
it. Like, what does
it-
proponent mean?
It's weird too with what I've researched about Craven. He liked being a director. He liked horror. He liked his genre, but he wasn't like very effusive about it in the way that someone like Guillermo del Toro might be. Like,
Right.
Del Toro talks about horror and sci-fi and fantasy, and he's like so into it, so excited to talk about it. Craven was always kind of like hedging his answers a little bit.
100%. I mean, if anything, I felt like he was a reluctant,
A bit.
pioneer, right?
Yeah.
I do think that it's not totally inaccurate. So I went to the dictionary on it because it
Oh, to
because
get proponent.
Yeah, a person who
Exactly.
advocates a theory, proposal, or project.
Yeah.
So I don't know that he's necessarily an advocate. It feels like the
Exactly.
wrong word. Although I do think he is unapologetic about being somebody who's willing to put gore and violence and some scary stuff on the screen.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he's like, he's pioneer, proud, or somebody who was bold even, but like proponent. I don't know.
I feel like visionary is better.
Yes.
I actually found a quote from him in an interview where this interviewer was asking him, like, why is the Academy Awards, why are the Oscars so disdainful of horror? And he says, I think because in some ways the material isn't that deep. If you look at Silence of the Lambs, they're willing to go there, but it has to have adult intelligence in order to be nominated for something by adults, which I think kind of shows how he appreciated the career he had, but he wasn't necessarily like mega proud of being a horror director. It seems like he wanted something more sophisticated, which like Proponent, which I think is a whole for one. Horror not being sophisticated is ridiculous, but also
Yes. Obviously.
he didn't like fully embody being a horror director to be Proponent of.
Yeah, it's a weird word in a number of ways.
Yeah.
Like it's the literal definition, the association of it, and like the truth of it. He
Yeah.
was reluctant. I think we're going to get into it in the conversation, but he was hesitant about his, role. And and it's even in the quiz that he did this movie with Meryl Streep was a
Yeah,
real
was his
like sign
passion
of like,
project.
please let me do something
Yeah,
other than horror.
that's what he wanted to do.
Right. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the rest. Other than the word proponent, I thought they actually did pretty good. I do
Yeah.
think that, like, what do you know this man for?
Yeah.
And this is, the first line of an obituary is a news headline.
Yeah,
And Nightmare on Elm Street and Scream,
those are it.
that's
yeah.
it, right? And they got the word franchises in there, not just those movies.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that that's important because he created
Totally.
franchises. Slasher genre, he was also, I don't know, that's right.
Yeah,
isn't it?
that's definitely right. That's
Okay.
definitely right. Both of those movies, Scream is playing with the slasher form. Nightmare is like very solidly a slasher movie.
Yes.
Those feel right. Yeah.
Okay. One more question. I'm curious to hear your reaction. Master of horror cinema. I mean, is that cliche? Is that corny? It's true. Like, if you were to come up with like great horror directors of all time,
Yeah.
I mean, I do think you're talking John Carpenter, Toby Hooper, maybe. I mean, well, especially of this generation.
Yeah, of the
Wes
70s,
Craven.
80s.
I mean, he created, franchises that changed film forever.
Yeah.
So Master feels like a little cliche, but it's actually really true.
No, I think it's true. I think it's, I mean, especially like his creations also spawned like a whole new genre of horror aside from the slasher.
Yeah.
Scary Movie only exists. That whole franchise only exists because of Scream.
Yeah.
I think that's fair. Especially because they're still making Scream movies now.
Yeah.
Scream 6 is coming out soon-ish. Like he's still relevant 30 years later, 40 years later.
All right, I think I got my score. You got your score? Oh, one more thing I wanted to say on the dictionary. Craven.
I know.
It's his actual last
It's
name.
his actual
Craven.
name.
So I was like, that is a word, right? Here's what the dictionary had to say about Craven.
Coward.
Lacking the least bit of courage,
Mm-hmm.
contemptibly faint-hearted,
Yeah.
archaic, defeated, vanquished. I mean, it's like the opposite of bold, brave.
Yeah,
Like this
yeah.
is, so for somebody who is dealing with fear, like
Mm-hmm.
in the, fear storytelling business, that's a great last name.
Oh, it's great. Yeah. And also insane that that's his actual last name.
That's his actual last name,
I
yeah.
know.
All right, what do you got score-wise?
I'm knocking off a few points for Proponent because I just think it's inaccurate. So 7. out of
Okay,
10.
wow, harsh
Yeah.
grader.
I don't know. It doesn't feel right. It just does. It's also a weird word. It doesn't sound good in the sentence. It's just weird.
Yeah, and it doesn't honor him, that's
Yeah.
for sure. It mischaracterizes him. So I agree. I was in a nicer mood today. I said 2 points, so I'm giving an 8 out of 10 for exactly the same reason. Like,
Yeah.
part of what the first line of an obituary has to do is honor this person, catch your attention, but it's also got to be accurate. And this is not accurate.
Yeah.
And, he died of brain cancer at 76. This is maybe one of those where they had written it before. They should have had it ready to go.
Probably so. He's not had the greatest health, so they probably had it ready and
Correct.
just didn't revisit it.
I dropped the ball. Sorry. All right. So 7 and an 8. Let's move on. Next category, 5 things I love about you. This category, we come up with 5 reasons why we love this person, why we wanted to be talking about them in the first place. I got a lot of stuff. Do you want to lead us off? You go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll start. He was a bird watcher, and I really liked. I don't know. There's something because I work in the film industry.
You mean this literally? Like
yeah,
Audubon
literally.
Society.
Literally, Audubon
love to
Society
watch
has an
it.
article about him on
Yeah.
their website. But like I work in the film industry. Being in film is really fast paced. It's really tiring. It kind of is attributive justice in a lot of ways. And I like the idea of Wes Craven having this like quiet time where he's just sitting around watching birds and listening for their calls and stuff. It just seems like such a nice foil to what he was doing for 40 years.
Yeah.
So I really like this idea of him. And also, I actually read some stuff where he used birds in the sound design of his films a lot because he loved birds so much.
Oh, no way.
Which is really cool.
That is really cool.
So yeah, it's just like a weird, totally different interests that combine in a really interesting way.
Surprising. You wouldn't
Yeah.
think the guy who's like hanging out dreaming up Freddy Krueger is like then going to go watch Robins,
Yes,
right?
but he is.
Yeah.
And he loved it.
Are you a birder?
No.
Okay. Have you ever tried to be a birder?
No.
Have you
I
ever
don't have
interacted
the-
with birders?
No.
Okay.
Aside from the fact that I know once you become a birder, it seems like it's impossible not to be one.
Yeah.
Like they get really fixated on birds.
It's like golf or
Yeah,
or
it is.
fishing. I
It
mean, it's
is.
like one of those things where
Yeah,
you
totally
meet the people who are
consuming.
into it and they're like crazy
Really,
into it. It's
really,
like
yeah.
cult-like that way.
Yeah.
My grandmother was a birder and a great lady, but I never got it. That's awesome. You know what? I'm going to skip ahead to my thing, number 2. I love that he was a recovering academic. This guy is a total nerd. He is like he was getting a PhD at Johns Hopkins
He
in
was.
humanities, and I mean, there's something really bookish about him, and he he's extremely well educated. And it turns out a lot of these horror directors from the 70s like have great liberal arts educations. Like they're really well-read people who are drawing inspiration from 18th and 19th century literature.
Yeah.
Well,
and
super surprising.
He had a lot of training in philosophy also.
Yes.
Which you see in his movies very clearly, which is really interesting.
But also like super surprising, right? I mean, I don't know, maybe you know more about this, but I expected Wes Craven to be like, I don't know, a little goth maybe, and like dark eyes, and a little like, I figured he'd freak me out. And it's like, this guy's a professor, he's a nerd.
This is always,
I mean, in a good way.
Yeah.
I mean that as a positive.
This is always, because clearly like I'm slight goth, but like this is always the misconception.
I mean, it's a
feel
compliment
like,
with you
thank
too.
you,
Yeah.
thank you. It's always a slight misconception, I feel like, with horror authors and directors, that you get this idea that they're going to be super kind of morose and quiet, and you get this like idea of who Edgar Allan Poe was, and you just like map it onto horror directors, when in reality a lot of the people who make horror content are very positive in real life. There are two famous Japanese artists, one being Hayao Miyazaki, and I can't Junji Ito, who's the other one. Hayao Miyazaki makes like pastoral fantasy movies, and he is so depressed in real life. And then Junji Ito makes these like horrible, disturbing comics, and he's the most upbeat person you've ever met. And I feel like the latter is true of most American horror film directors too.
Yeah.
That they're just like very nice and enjoyable to be around, but they make this really awful content.
I mean, on some level, you see that in a lot of art, right? People do surprise you that way, where it's like you see one thing when you look at them and meet them in person and feel like you take the pulse of their personality, and they are able to express a completely different subconscious side. Yeah. You know, through and that's true here. But I was delighted to learn it.
Yeah, and he is such an academic.
Yeah,
in his interviews, he talks like one.
No, and can you imagine, like, I don't know, he was taught high school for a year. Can you imagine being, like, in Wes Craven's high school class and then 5 years later seeing Nightmare on Elm Street?
I
right?
can't.
Like,
it's crazy.
That was the guy who made me read To Kill a Mockingbird, you know? And here he is, like, with these gloved hands.
Yeah.
Anyway. All right, you want to take number 3?
He was a sound editor, was one of his first roles in breaking into the film industry, which I like because no one ever thinks about us and we get forgotten. So I like that he was one.
Yeah.
And that's really all I have. It's just, as a sound editor, I was like, yes, great, amazing.
So Morgan and I work together on a number of projects, and you do, you handle a lot of the technical production, but Morgan also has a lot of talents in terms of sound design. And like sound design in film is so underrated. Yeah. And it's like, I don't know, I think somebody said to me once about video, like, if you want to pay attention to how information is being communicated, you can mute the TV and see what's happening, and if you can follow the story, or you can close your eyes and just listen to the story. And that tells you which is the richer experience. Yeah. And like great sound design can really elevate a project.
Yeah, and for horror, it's very important.
It's essential,
yeah. Score and sound design are very important for horror.
Cool, okay. What are we on, number 4? Yeah, okay, number 4. I'll take number 4. I wrote that he was a late bloomer. So he grew up in a very strict household. It was, a household of faith. His dad died when he was 4 or 5 years old. His mom worked, and it sounded like the church played a very big role in just his upbringing. But he didn't see any movies that were not Disney movies until his senior year of college. And so he really didn't like grow up with the language of film, right? No, he didn't grow up knowing how to make a movie. And then senior year of college, he sees his first non-Disney movie, and then when he's teaching, he also gets involved with like an art house club. Did you see this?
I did, yeah.
So here's what I love about that. I think it's a real. When it comes to creative pursuits, I think sometimes I feel like I missed the boat. Like if I didn't grow up, playing guitar from age 8, then I'll never be able to pick up a guitar, or I'll never be able to. I don't know. I think it's an important lesson overall. So it's never too late to learn a new skill, and this was an example of someone who was very late to the party of how to make great movies, and yet he had as much success as anybody. So I just love that. He's a late bloomer.
Yeah. that's good. I like that one.
Thank you. All right, you round us out with number 5. What do you got?
So it's kind of ties into him being a late bloomer. By the time Craven was making movies, he already had a family, he had kids, and a lot of the really important creative decisions for A Nightmare on Elm Street seem to have come from him listening to his teenage daughter.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Johnny Depp's first role is Nightmare on Elm Street. That's his first casting was Wes Craven. Wes Craven's who made him, and the only reason they cast Johnny Depp is that his daughter saw a picture of him in like the back of Craven's car and was like, "Oh, he's really cute. That should be the boyfriend in the movie." And Wes Craven had intended on like casting someone who was like bigger, more of like a jock type.
Yeah, football player.
Yeah,
something.
football player.
Yeah.
And they changed it to be someone who's like a little more not feminine, but less masculine than that.
Yeah.
And who was a little more boyish, like who looked more like a teenager than like an actor pretending to be a teenager. And then also his daughter helped him like with what someone would actually do confronted with the things that are chasing them in Nightmare on Elm Street. And not just like run screaming out the door, but like, okay, if this happened to you, my 14-year-old daughter, what would you do? And that's part of what makes that movie really interesting is it feels very grounded. And that is definitely his breakout movie. So pretty much the reason he's the name that he is now is because he listened to his kid, which I think is great.
Yeah.
So,
well, and more importantly, I think his daughter. I mean,
Yeah.
you and I talked a little bit about this before the recording, that his first movie, Last House on the Left,
yes.
that is really, really problematic movie.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
sick. And
Yeah.
it's like, and it sounds like it was never really meant for a large audience.
No,
but like
he didn't
caught
think
a
it
cult
would.
status, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it does seem like if you look at the trajectory of his career and his movies, like young women get more and more powerful in
Yeah.
the story as
Yeah.
as he gets older.
That's
you know?
a lot of his legacy in terms of the art he made is like making teenage girls have significance
Yeah.
and not just be these things that get killed and thrown
Yeah, I mean,
to the side.
What's the line from Screen? Neve Campbell says like these horror movies are some big-breasted blonde doesn't know
yeah.
how to leave the house.
Yeah,
or
she
something.
won't just run out the front door.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
so he gets very like self-aware of
yeah,
like
yeah, definitely in Scream.
how hard these things are.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, I think that rounds out our 5. Let's recap real quick. Number 1, you said
He's a birder.
he's a
Birdwatcher.
birder. I forgot all about that in the last 15 minutes. Number 2, what did I say? He's a nerd, which kind
An
of
academic.
dovetails.
Recovering
I'll say
academic, which I
recovering
like that,
academic.
yeah.
I relate to that one too. I'm also a recovering academic. Number 3, you said
Sound editor.
sound editor. Number 4, I went with late bloomer. And number 5,
Listening to Jennifer Craven.
listening to Jennifer Craven. All right, great list. 5 things we love about Wes Craven. Okay.
Jessica Craven. Sorry.
I'm sorry, Jessica Craven.
There
All
we
right.
go.
So we have modified this our format. Usually we do a whole bunch of other categories. Just for the sake of this recording, we're going to do this a little different. And I want a little audience participation in this one. So our next category is net worth. I wrote down a number ahead of time before I looked it up. Should we hear from the audience first, or should I?
Let's do the audience.
Okay. Who wants to guess Wes Craven's net worth at death? Show of hands. Not everybody at once. Yeah. 3 million. 3 million? I have 3.
Okay.
10 million? Does
All
anybody
right.
want to go $1? Do the
12.
12 million? Any other guesses? 20 million.
Okay.
There we go.
What did you say, Mike?
I said 30 million.
I said 50 million.
Correct answer. 40 million. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Well done, Wes Craven. 40 million. How do you feel about that number? I mean, for franchises, right?
That's the thing is for the franchises he created, it seems right, especially not as much for Nightmare, even though Nightmare on Elm Street, like Freddy Krueger, that name has like such significance culturally in
I mean,
America.
I wonder about the rights too, like Halloween costumes and
That's
lunchboxes,
the
like the
thing.
merch on.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's with Ghostface and Scream.
Yeah.
Just the sheer merchandising money from that costume alone made me push it up past like 25 million. Because that's still one of the most popular. You see it at Spirit Halloween, you see it at Walmart, everywhere. You still see Ghostface. And that's an original concept. So they're not paying like royalties to the author who made it and then Wes Craven. They're paying it to Wes Craven and the screenwriter on Scream, whose name's escaping me. But
Yeah.
merchandising is huge for him.
Do you like is Freddy Krueger going to fade with age, or is he still a monster
No.
for the kiddos? You're younger
Yeah.
than me, are you?
I-
Yeah, I am. Then you know.
Well,
this.
even in shows like Rick and Morty, he's like spoofed.
Yeah.
Still, The Simpsons had a version of Freddy Krueger in one of their like Halloween specials. Like he still is just extremely culturally significant.
There's a memory of Freddy
Yeah,
Krueger, and I mean the same thing with like Jason. Some
Yeah.
of these movies, but I mean, in a way, Freddy Krueger is definitely more famous than Wes Craven.
Definitely more famous than Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees
Yeah.
or anyone in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah,
And I think partially he's very distinctive looking,
Yeah.
but also like he kind of exists as a more specific boogeyman. Like you say boogeyman, you don't really picture anything. And you say Freddy Krueger and there's immediate, like, I know exactly who that is. I know who they look like, what they're like,
Yeah.
because it's still like part of the substream of culture.
yeah. I feel like we should tell the story real quick of how Freddy Krueger came to be, like the origin story.
Sure, you take it.
You want me to take this?
Yeah,
Well, I
yeah.
mean, you correct me as if where I get it wrong, but so it's based on a couple things. There was a semi-true story of a I think Cambodian family living in LA or something, where the son was having nightmares and was afraid to go to sleep and was not taking sleeping pills, and his father was like, go to sleep, and then sort of horrific details, but he goes to bed one night and is thrashing around in his sleep, and they find him dead or something. And this was like one of 2 or 3 stories in the newspapers around this time.
Yeah.
But that's like the concept of a monster in your nightmares that can actually kill you. That's where he got the inspiration for that. But the other part that I thought was really interesting was his origin story with like what. And maybe you should take this part. Do you remember this? The like vagrant that hung outside his house.
the homeless person
Yeah.
who was outside. Yeah.
When Wes Craven's like 6
Yeah,
or
he's
7.
really young and he sees a person outside. Freddy Krueger famously wears like an old floppy hat and this like torn sweater. And he sees someone who looks kind of like that outside who like stares at him through his bedroom window as a kid. And he like leaves and comes back and this person's like still staring in the exact same spot. And of course, as a kid, that's terrifying. As an adult, that's terrifying.
Yeah, I'm freaked out just hearing about
That's
it.
something
yeah.
that stays with you, you
Yeah.
know. There's also a little, I don't
on
know
the
how
hand,
much.
is that what you want to talk about?
Oh no, not there's also at
The
this time in the Nightmare on Elm Street came out in the mid 80s, but in the late 70s there were some like child sexual assault cases that were popping up in the news. And it's weird that in Nightmare on Elm Street they always call Krueger like the child murderer, but like he's very clearly meant to be like sort of this pedophilic character. And they apparently changed it during production because there were some cases in the news that they thought it would be insensitive to have this be like mining the trauma of these children. So they changed Krueger to just be like he kills children instead of being something more devious than that.
Wow,
Yeah.
I didn't see that. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, the only other thing I was going to say about Freddy Krueger it was all this that like how he thought of the gloved hand with the knives.
I don't know this. You gotta.
Well, I mean, he just talked about it. Like he was very intellectual about all of this, right? He was like that he wanted something primal, and that and he was thinking about like claws, and then there's something that's distinctively human about the hand, and let's make that have knives on it. And so he comes up with this original I mean, that's the thing about Freddy Krueger. He's like very original as a monster, right?
Yeah.
In terms of what he represents.
Definitely.
All right, let's move on to the next category. So this is one that we haven't done on the show for a while, but we call it Good Dreams, Bad Dreams. Does this person have a haunted look in their eyes, something that suggests inner demons, inner pain, or unresolved trauma?
Yeah.
So this is our opportunity to talk about how, what you see. Like, do you see darkness, when you look at the pictures of this guy? And it's also our opportunity to talk about potentially regrets, the kinds of things that wake you up in the middle of the night and keep you awake. All right, what'd you go for Good Dreams, Bad Dreams?
I kind of copped out and said both.
You can't, no, you gotta make
Okay,
a
hold
call.
on. I do. There is a point at which it flips. I
Yeah.
think Wes Craven has talked specifically about as a kid. struggling with nightmares.
Yes.
But when I see interviews and footage of him later in life, I think that's something that he moved past. And I think by the time he's directing, he seems very comfortable. He seems very personable. He's like very warm.
Yeah.
And like in the interviews that I've read about him, you know, people who were with him actually interviewing him face to face, they say the same thing. And I don't see anything like keeping him up at night once he's actually directing these really scary movies, which is ironic. But, you know, as a kid, he talked about having them. I don't think as a fully formed human adult, he had them.
I mean, so are you saying good dreams or bad dreams?
I'm saying good dreams.
That's what I would
Yeah.
too, for exactly the same reason. I think that there's something cathartic about all this for him. I think that the idea of taking a childhood experience of having a vagrant stare you down through your window while your parents are gone and giving that person the power to kill in dreams with a gloved-handed knife. There's something about like, well, that's my worst fear, and now that I've seen it, I can deal with it a little bit better. I can confront it. And I also don't think, we mentioned this earlier, that he's all that regretful about some of his depictions of violence on screen. And he's asked about this all the time.
Yeah.
So in terms of regret for what he's doing as a creative in horror movies, I don't see a lot. Where I do see a lot of regret, because this comes up over and over again, is being pigeonholed.
Yes, I think that's definitely true. It's hard for any director or creative person in general, actors too. Like, you know, at this point, it's impossible to imagine Tom Cruise in anything but Mission Impossible movies, because that's what he does now.
Yeah.
And for directors, especially horror is this really difficult genre to break out of once you're there. Like, I feel like William Friedkin, who directed The Exorcist, is a really great example of someone who directed one horror movie, and he made so many other great horror or non-horror movies, but what we remember him for is this one movie. That is all he ever did, and that's pretty much, unless you're me and you like movies a lot, that's pretty much anyone, like,
that's their
they
association.
only know him for The Exorcist. Yeah, and it's true of John Carpenter. It's true of Craven.
Yeah.
It's true these
Polanski's
days.
sort of moved beyond me, problematic figure, but Polanski does.
Polanski, he's one that was able, but again, he only made the one. He made Rosemary's Baby, and that was it.
That's what I'm saying. He kind of built
one and done.
Right,
you know?
right.
You can have, you know, people like Ridley Scott who make Alien, which people still argue if it's a horror movie. It's a horror movie, but like it's in space. It's fine. Yeah. But like he was able to get through it because he kind of genre blended. But when you make these like very very subjectively horror movies that are just like, this is horror, there is nothing else here, it's really hard to break, and especially slashers.
And he like, if you track his interviews throughout the years, he's like, yeah, I'd like to do something else. Yeah, I'd really like to do something else. And he did one Meryl Streep movie. She got a nomination. She always gets a freaking nomination. And then he's like, back to 99 Meryl Streep.
Well, and he got to direct one segment in Paris Je t'aime, and that was it.
Yeah. But he also does, I think, even more than, and I think it's because the name's so distinct. He does become a brand. Like, it's not just Scream. It's Wes Craven's.
It's Wes Craven's.
And Wes Craven's new nightmare,
just
right?
Like it's John Carpenter's Halloween.
Correct.
It becomes something that is bigger than just who he is as a person.
It's kind of your fault. Wes, you know what I mean? Yeah. So, but overall, we both went good dreams.
Yeah.
I like that. I mean, I think on balance, and it does sound like the later interviews, he's like, look, I had a good career. He didn't mention the $40 million, but I'm sure that made him sleep well at night.
I think so.
So
comfortably. At
so
very
good
least.
dreams for horror.
Yeah, I think so.
Master of horror,
I
Wes
think
Craven.
so.
All right, we've got 3 more categories. The next one is a fan favorite: coffee, cocktail, or cannabis. This is where we ask which one would we most want to do with our dead celebrity. This may be a question of what drug sounds like the most fun to partake with this person. So kind of a vibe, a hangout thing. Or another philosophy is that a particular kind of drug might allow access to a part of them that we're most curious about, might unlock them somehow. I am dying to know what you went with here.
Coffee.
Oh.
No. Okay,
Actually, I almost did that too, but I got a different answer. Go ahead.
So I read a bunch of like written interviews with Wes Craven. And pretty much every person talked about how he would bring them in for a meal, specifically like an early lunch. Mm-hmm. And all of these interviews, the interviewers would talk about like how much they chatted outside of the interview. And it seems like he gave them permission to print very specific things, but the overall experience was a lot more like deep and personal than what he allowed them to print.
Yes.
And so in my fantasy of meeting Wes Craven, I'm in Maine and it's like really, really snowy outside. And we are there at 7 a.m. at a diner and we're drinking coffee until like 4 p.m. talking.
Yeah.
And I think that sounds really nice and cozy. And he seems like someone that would like to talk for a long time over a cup of coffee.
I think he's a conversationalist.
Yeah,
I also think
exactly.
he's got a sense of humor that never found
Totally.
an expression. I mean,
Well,
he wrote
Scream
comedies.
is hilarious.
It is funny,
So,
right? And,
yeah.
and there's absolutely a self-aware quality.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, I almost went coffee for the same reason, Morgan. I think that, like, I love a great brain, and I love an academic if you get them in the right setting, and
Yeah,
you know, sit
yeah.
and talk about literature and story and why a thing works, and you know how he learned the language of film. So, and I love the main diner scene. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay, I went with cannabis.
I knew you were going to pick
Well,
that.
okay, but but I'm going a direction I'm not sure you're going to think. Okay, so you and I have talked about this a little bit. So I am retired from drugs and alcohol. I don't partake anymore, and it's been about 10 years since I have. But 10 and a half years ago, I was camping with some friends. And I found myself around a campfire where somebody handed me a bong, and there was some weed in there that was like the kind of weed you'd see on like the cover of High Times. It was like crystally and like sparkling and like looked really potent. I took one hit of this 3-foot bong and coughed my lungs out for the next 20 minutes and ended up having a like total paranoia.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Right? I want to do that with Wes Craven. And I want to.
You want to bring up all the religious
I
trauma.
absolutely do. Because I was really not. Yes, I
Yeah,
want.
you
I
do.
want to go
Yeah.
to those depths where because I think that like fundamentally what he is doing and what like people who are telling great stories are doing, there is some element of confronting fear, right? And there is some element of like some of your fears are fanciful and they come to you in the middle of the night and they are built out of whatever crazy story that your mind creates. So there's an element of fantasy, but they're also symbolic. There's something really important there to be looked. And I do think overall the grand challenge of life is how you deal with your fear, right? I mean, I really do think that at the end of the day, anything I'm proud of is fear that I've looked at and moved through and beyond. And being able to sort out what's real and what's not is kind of like the whole point to me. And I kind of feel like I don't want a therapist for that. I want Wes Craven
You want Wes
for that.
Craven?
Yeah, I want to have a paranoid reaction to a bong hit with Wes Craven and
Oh
him
my
say,
God.
let's okay, Michael, lean into the darkness. It's okay. Some of this is real. Some of this is not. You're probably going to wake up. You're probably going to wake up alive. And all this means something, and let's deal with it. So.
See, what he's actually going to do is tell you all of his crazy voodoo stories from shooting that Serpent in the Rainbow movie or whatever.
Let's go there.
And you're never going to recover.
Yeah, no, there is a point of trauma, let's be clear. So yeah, I don't know, maybe I can have something to offset that too. But anyway.
You're
so I went
definitely at
cannabis.
a bonfire, though.
I'm
I
at
can
a
see it.
bonfire.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. Plus
Yeah.
I do think he has a little bit of a Zen-like quality.
Oh,
like there
yeah,
is
yeah.
something grounded and secure
He
about
is.
his presence.
Yeah, he's very comfortable.
Yeah. Okay, second to last category, the Vanderbeek, named after James Vanderbeek, who said in the movie Varsity Blues, "I don't want your life." The big question is, do you want this life?
I mean, as a filmmaker, like, yes, this is the dream. And this is something that Craven's talked about in interviews of, like, he got to do the thing that we all want to do, which is to make art that really impacts people in a really positive way. Because, disregarding The Last House on the Left, which he himself has disregarded and is infamous now, he kind of spent most of his career making up for that movie. And he did that really significantly. I mean, he pushed not just horror, but film forward in really interesting ways. Like, I watched Nightmare on Elm Street last night, and it's funny and it's cool, but like visually, some of the effects are stuff we've never seen, like, still. Like, he's done stuff that's really cool with like rotating sets and And even aside from all of like the technological feats that he did as an artist, like his movies are still significant and mean a lot, especially to teenage girls. And I think that is beautiful. He makes them feel powerful. He makes them feel significant, which is very hard when you're 14 to feel significant.
Yeah. Well, let me push on it, though, because that's sort of a legacy answer, right? He had an impact, and he made a contribution, and he will be remembered, and his creations will be remembered. But what about the inner life?
Personal.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, his, his marital life was a bit fraught, it seems. He had 3 wives. The second one seemed to go very badly.
Yeah, 1986 is a rough year in Wes Craven's life.
Yeah. I mean, because I also grew up Baptist, and so I kind of know what that's like, and I'm okay now, so I can deal with that part of it.
Yeah.
But
we didn't go. Yeah. Enough said.
But I don't know. Watching him in interviews later, and looking through the lens of his work, just like what his work tells us about him, I think that I would want to be that kind of person. I mean, he seems pretty content by the end.
Yeah.
Again, like just reading some of the like behind the writing in the interviews, they'll paint a portrait of like, oh, he made us lunch, whatever. He seemed very at ease and very happy in his later years, even with having a cancer diagnosis.
Yeah.
So I think I would. And it's hard for me as someone who works in film to be like, no, I don't want to make 2 of the biggest franchises ever that are still significant now.
Yeah.
But aside from that, I think he had a pretty great life. It seems awesome. He did a lot before he even got into film, which I think is wonderful.
Yeah.
And I think that makes the best filmmakers personally. But
So you're a yes.
I'm a yes. It didn't take me long to be like, yes.
Yeah, it seems like you're pretty easily convinced. I think that's probably where I'm at too, Morgan. I think I'm a yes on the. I mean, I do think that, like, one thing I really love about him as a creative is that there was never really a plan. Like, he's on his ass a few times in his life.
Yes.
Leading up to Nightmare on Elm Street.
And
like, he's dead broke, and he did not want to take a job as a high school teacher, and he's like, but. And so there is a kind of like artist's life of, I'm committed to something that I really believe in, and I have an inner confidence and faith that's going to guide me to somewhere. And then, the stuff about being brought up in a fundamentalist Baptist context, he never is like exactly outright bad-mouthing the church.
He doesn't.
I think he's more just saying, there were things I was not exposed to.
Yeah, his specific experience seemed a bit more rigorous than most people who grow up in the church.
Yes, you get that vibe. Yeah. And you kind of feel like he's reacting against something with these movies, right? There is a rebelliousness to it.
What's interesting, though, is it's not a rebelliousness against Christianity. His movies are, like, very, it's about these girls who are all, like, they're all virginal. They all like wear like gold crosses around their necks and are very like girl next door. It's not even like Christianity that he's pushing against, but there is something.
So what do you think he's rebelling against?
I don't know. That's what's interesting. That's why I want to have coffee with him in Maine. Yeah. Is I would figure that out.
Yeah. I made it all about me and the campfire and you're like inquisitive. Yeah. I mean, I do think that some of it is societal. I mean, all of these directors who come out of the 70s are in some way, shape, or form responding to the experience of the Vietnam War. Yeah. And in their displays of violence, they're saying something about like what it was like to watch the news, and how confusing it was, and how confusing adulthood is. Yeah. So I think there is a kind of like general unfiltered rebellion. I don't know that it's political, and I don't know that it's. I think if anything, it's more about ourselves and our fears.
It feels very personal.
And on that score, I'm also a yes.
Yeah.
I'm also a yes. I don't have to think about it too much either. He is more well-rounded and well versed and interesting than I ever would have thought. I haven't gotten into birds yet, but I could. Like I'm holding out possibility for that. I haven't. And I also think that like. You may have big dreams to be, the next Spielberg or the next, I don't know who you want to reference, somebody who gets to dabble in a lot of genres. But he does seem by the end like I got I had a good run, and I've got gratitude around that.
Yeah.
And you get that vibe.
Well, and he did, again, like he, mostly stayed within horror, but what he did within the genre was extremely revolutionary.
Yes.
Especially when you're talking about Scream.
Yeah.
Like Scream, was released in 96, I think, right before Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which both of those together kind of reshaped what teen TV media is, and also what like horror is as a genre, that it can also be really funny. You can mix being afraid and laughing at the same time, and often that's like way more satisfying of an experience because it's much more three-dimensional.
I think that there's at least three major legacy contributions. I think the work in the 70s, however problematic it is, does show a kind of renegade, you can do this on a shoestring budget, look what's possible, and look at the aesthetics I created. I do think Nightmare on Elm Street introduces this idea of dream logic, and that
what is
like...
rubber narrative? There's a term
there's a
for
term
like
I came
that,
across.
like in Hellraiser 2, where you don't know watching it as a viewer if it's real or imaginary.
Yeah, and that's what movies are all about.
Yeah, it's cool.
Right?
It's great.
It's very meta that way. And then as you said, Scream.
Yeah. I do want to, before we go to our last, I do have one thing on Last House on the Left that I think is also something I would want to experience if I had his life, which is just having something that is such an unmitigated failure. Like, I think that's really important for directors, for musicians, for anyone. We act like if they make something bad, that means they're suddenly not as good as they were.
Yeah.
When really, when people make bad art, usually it's because they're trying something different and they don't know how to do it yet. Like today, this is the first live event for Famous and Gravy. It's not going to be perfect, but we're doing okay. And for Wes Craven, Last House on the Left was his first feature. It was something that he had never really like written a full script before. And I would want that experience if I had his life, of having something that really pulled me down, because then you learn so much from it. And he never really made those mistakes again.
I think that speaks to my point earlier about fear. I
Yeah,
mean, a lot of it
exactly.
is risk, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of it is the vulnerability of like, screw it, I'm going for it, which ultimately, you don't know. That somebody told me once, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is fear with feet.
Yeah.
I'm scared of trying this thing, and I'm going to
I'm
do
gonna
it
do it.
anyway,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
And
And learning all the right lessons from it, because he
Yeah.
did. He never made something like that again. He's embarrassed of it, but he knows why, and that's really important.
Yeah. Upward staircase.
Yeah,
Right?
basically.
Like that's what
Honestly,
Famous and
yeah.
Gravy is all about. Did he climb the upward staircase?
And he definitely did,
So-
at least creatively.
Yeah. All right, so we're both yeses. All right, I think we're at the final category, the pitch at the pearly gates.
All right. Michael,
Yeah, hang on. I gotta.
you got to get in the
I
zone.
gotta imagine birds. for a
Okay.
minute. Just gotta zen out and channel my inner Wes Craven.
All right, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Michael, imagine that you are Wes Craven. You have passed on, and you are now standing before the pearly gates. St. Peter, the arbiter of the afterlife, is waiting for you, and it is time to plead your case. What do you say?
St. Peter, this may be a little bit of an awkward conversation because on its face, what it looks like I did down there was terrify people. Was scare the heck out of them, scare the heck out of parents, scare the heck out of children, scare the heck out of teens, scare the heck out of movie-going audiences everywhere. But underneath that was a real, true intention to confront fear, to try and imagine fears that exist inside all of us, to give that some sort of representation in a monster, and in a monster that lived in your dreams, and in a monster that may be lurking outside your house. And while there are things to be scared of, if we are not brave and if we're not confronting our fears, then we'll never realize who we can be. And I try to communicate that to audiences through multiple franchises and throughout my creative life. I think that's a contribution to the stream of life. Let me in. Thank you. This was fun.
Yeah.